Okay. All right. So you guys remember the SCLC, right? And just reiterate through and remind ourselves what really happens. Study number 1, right? So you study the requirement. Number 2, what is what? You guys tell me first, because it's been a while.
Test plan.
Okay. 3. Who wants to tell me?
Test scenario.
Test design.
So test case is test design, right? Okay,
Execute
and then
test cases. And then
test
log and track.
cases. And number 6 is log and track. Okay, that's good. Now, where is the automation falls in? Because, like we've been learning how to write code. Where is it falling in right now? Where do you think your automation falls in?
Execution
executing.
of test cases.
So when you say execution of test cases, but where is your script? Where do you write code, right? You cannot execute without writing the code. So it's going to fall in right here, So this is where write test a script, okay? The idea is that if you can avoid duplicate work, meaning if you write test cases and then automate, then you did double the work, right? So you already wrote the test case, and after that you have to write the test script. Compared to getting the test scenarios and deciding which one will be automated and which one will be manually tested. So as soon as you have the test scenarios ready, you can decide which test cases should be automated and which test cases should be manually tested. Once you make the choice and you pick your candidate based off of this scenario list, and you say, okay, I picked these 3 to be automated and these 6 to be manually tested. Then you create your test cases and then you write your test script. Once you finish writing your test script, then you can execute both at the same time. This will be executed by human and this will be executed automatically. Okay. Now, for you to be able to write this script, you need to use some sort of tools. And in our case, we're going to be using IntelliJ. And why do we need IntelliJ, guys? You guys remember?
It's very interactive. User
Right. So
friendly.
this is where it's interactive, and this is where we can write our code, and it will tell us, or at least give us a reminder line by line where we're making mistakes, or it'll also give us suggestions. So now we're going to use IntelliJ. We're going to use Java, which we already luckily know a little bit, right? And then we're going to learn something called Selenium, right? So Selenium is going to allow you to control the browser. Selenium is not a programming language. It is a tool that was created with Java or other programming language. So really, Selenium is flexible. So it doesn't only work with Java, it works with other languages like Ruby, C#, .NET, right? These are few major languages that it works with. So for each language type, it has its own version, right? So now Selenium, since it was written in Java for our case, because we're going to be using Java, it'll be easier for us to work with because we already know Java. And this tool is there to just control the browser. That's it. It tells browser what to do, and it does it. It does exactly what you tell it to do. So keep in mind, let's say you guys work for JetBlue, right? Everybody here works for JetBlue. Now, if you work for JetBlue and this website was in the backend created with, let's say, C#, which is not a Java language, right? So C# looks like this. This is called C#, right? So and it's not created by Java. Do you think you will be able to use Selenium to automate this? Or you cannot?
I think no, because doesn't it need Java?
So remember, Selenium was built with Java, right? For example, right? The version that we will use was built with Java. But this guy controls the browser, right? The way it takes commands, we write it in Java language and it understands. So if I say, go ahead and open this browser, it will open it for me, right? Go ahead and go to this website and it will do it for me, right? So if you really think about it, Selenium by itself really doesn't care what technology application was created. As long as that application is a web-based application, and it does have a lot of limitation, and web-based application and has 3 parts. So any web-based application, and it doesn't matter what technology they use behind it, it will have 3 parts because the browser understands those 3 parts. The first part is HTML that you see here, and HTML is responsible for the structure of the application, how it's displaying things and where it's displaying. For example, the footer and header and this box right here, as you can see, I just use the selector, I can see exactly where it is. And then you have CSS. CSS is responsible for I would say more on the looks, right? Making it more nicer, looking at more pleasing to your eyes. So if I click on this guy, I can go ahead and edit the CSS if I like, if I want to, right? I can just go ahead and make it orange, right? And now this button is orange because CSS has been changed. And the last thing that we want to talk about is the JavaScript. Now, JavaScript is basically right here, and you can see like these guys really left a lot of console.log, which is like system.out.println, right? So they left a lot of those here. But in JavaScript is not Java, right? It's different. So now JavaScript is responsible for making it more interactive. So when you click on it and it opens up a option, this is JavaScript. JavaScript is really there to make it more and more seamless experience and interaction when customer interactions make some interaction with the application. So really you have to understand 3 things. One is the HTML, who's responsible for the initial layout of the application. Second, the JavaScript is basically making it more interactive. So if I click on it, it does something. And then third one, color and how the font size is, font, and how the the look of the application is really depending on the CSS side. So if somebody builds a web-based application, no matter what technology it is, at the end of the day, we get these 3 files that is created. Server actually uses those 3 files to give you the website. So again, technology being used in an application doesn't matter. Selenium can automate any web-based application because number 1, Selenium can control browser. That's the dependency there, right? The browser can do whatever it wants, right? The browser can go to the website and do whatever it wants to do. So really there is no, dependency here for the Selenium to say, I cannot work with this web-based application because of this and that. As long as you can bring it on the browser, as long as you can actually do it yourself manually here, Selenium will do it. The other thing you have to understand about Selenium is that Selenium was created to mimic actual human. So for example, Selenium has the ability to type text here from the back, right? Meaning it doesn't have to type it like a user, like for example, this New York, right? It doesn't have to type 1 character at a time. It can actually just go on the back and just go ahead and fill it in for you. But it doesn't do that. Selenium actually types each character at a time just to mimic you, right? So that way, when you automating your tasks, you are not really mimicking a machine. And at the end of the day, when the on your web-based application is released to the public and nothing works, okay, nothing will work because it was actually tested by machine for machine, right? It actually mimicked machine rather than human. So everything that Selenium tries to do, like even to click on it, it will try to mimic human. So that way, at least when the actual users are using the application, they don't have any sort of difficulty or any sort of bugs that they're facing. because the testing was done in the perspective of human. So just keep in mind, otherwise anybody can, like developers can write a bunch of code and do this testing, and it would be much easier because we do everything in the back end or everything on the back instead of like looking on the front end side. This is on the UI side, basically. So all the effort for the Selenium team was to say, okay, how would a human will interact with this part of the application, or at least part of this, functionality, and then that's what they actually try to do. Now, with Selenium, we have 4 different parts that you have to, you kind of have to understand. Selenium has a suite, right? So so Selenium suite includes 4 different tools that we will learn about, right? So number 1 is Selenium IDE. One second, my mouse just lost the charge. Okay. And number 2 is going to be Selenium Grid. Let me just. Anybody ever heard of these tools before, or this is the first time?
First
Number
time.
4, Selenium RC, and sorry, number 3, and number 4 is going to be Selenium WebDriver. Trust me, once it's first time, but I guess once you see your first automated test, you're going to be hooked. Okay, so now we're talking about 4 different tools, and they have 4 different, ways of working, and we will talk about those. But these are 4 different, tools that Selenium offers as of right now. Selenium is a open source technology. That means all of this stuff that you're seeing on your screen, Selenium IDE, Read, RC, and WebDriver, you're able to just download it right now and be able to start working on it. You don't need to pay for anything. You don't have to, make any sort of arrangement or agreement with any, any company to say, I'm going to use this for commercial reasons or personal reasons. So how does open source technology works? And I'll tell you why, open source is probably the best, right? Before Selenium, there was a tool called, I would say, let me see, it's called QTP. And this is something that I actually learned initially myself before even jumping into open source. So back in the days, QTP was really, really hot. This was created by HP. And right now, if you find, it's called, if you look at online, it's called UFT, HP UFT. This tool uses light version of programming language. It is very similar to Java in order for you to automate. The good thing about this tool back then was you don't need to know coding. You just need to know how to use the tool. That's it. Because the code will be done for you, because this tool have the ability to create the code as it will listen to everything that you do on a web-based application. So if you click here, it will say, oh, okay, I'll go ahead and record this line of code. So everything that you do, it will record it for you in code. Later, you copy the code or whatever you want to do with that code and be able to replay. So this tool had the ability to basically record your action and then replay at the end, right? So replay whenever you want. So so if you really think about it, if you want to write a test case, you would first try to record your actions, and later you just play those actions back, and that's it. You just basically go ahead and wrote a test case in test automation. So this was something back then was really, really hot, I would say, because many companies didn't have test engineers that knows how to write program, knows how to write code. Now, whenever you deal with a tool like this, it comes with some drawback because they assume you have no programming language. Everything is really, really, down to the portion, meaning there is a very less flexibility. So if you want to do something different, you can't, because you have to be within what they assumed that you need for your project. The other thing over the years when Selenium came in happened is that Selenium happened to be more and more and more advanced than HPA UFT because this was an open source tool. And this was a company, I would say this is more a commercial tool where a company has to pay close to $1 million, I mean, more than $1 million yearly basis just to use this tool, right? So now let's say my company has 500 testers because it's a huge company. And now each one of the tester needs access to UFT. Per license, I think it was like $50,000 per year per license. So just think about it, how much money a company would use compared to having Selenium. Really don't have to worry about money at all. Just focus on writing tests. That's it. Now, but despite these huge expenses, a lot of companies were using Q2P and UFT, which is their same basically. Q2P was renamed to UFT. But what happened is that they stuck in the past, right? They couldn't come out of as technology advanced, they couldn't really advance their tool. Let's just say that, right? Because it's a small team, maybe a team of 50 engineers building this tool, UFT, compared to hundreds of thousands of people are working on Selenium, right? Anybody has any question why hundreds and thousands of people are working? And this is unpaid people, right? People that are not really getting paid at all, but they're working on Selenium, meaning building and making Selenium better and better and better. Why do you think that will be the case? Let's talk about that for a second before we move on. Anybody has an idea? Okay. So seems like everybody has an idea, so I don't have to explain. Now, here is, all right, I'll explain. Now, guys, just interact, right? So that way, you know, like I said, it's going to be easier for you and for me if we are able to interact more during the class. Now, the reason why Selenium have so many developers who's passionate about coding, putting their hard work to make these tools better versus Q2P or UFT, HP is actually recruiting people, putting them into the project, and their only job is to work on this project. Only 50 to 60 people, maybe 100 if they're being generous. That was something, was because this is a open source tool, meaning if you're a developer and who has a lot of knowledge of coding, you can literally go ahead and write some code for Selenium Grid, Selenium WebDriver today, right now. We can go and pull this code repository, which is public, and we can see where we need to make the improvement, and we can push this code back to the original team. So they do have a team of people that are responsible, and these guys are volunteers. And these people will go ahead and review your code and say, okay, this is going to add more. This is going to make our tool more better. So we're going to accept the code, right? So they have the ability to accept or reject the code based on what you've done for them. So just like that, millions of people are using Selenium, and there are companies that use Selenium, and some of the developers are really, really smart. So they would say, you know what, I would like to put my name into the Selenium team. I'm going to work on a few things. I'm going to go ahead and update a few things and see if they like my code. Sometimes developers will say, okay, I really, really want this specific feature that Selenium is missing. I'm going to go ahead and add it myself. Now that I added myself, I'm going to ask my company for permission to release this code to the entire world by going back to Selenium team and say, hey, here's my code. You want it? So that's how really, Selenium was able to be more relevant with the upcoming technologies, or at least up-to-date technology. On the other hand, Q2P was stuck behind because web-based application has changed the way that they're developing this web-based application. So over the years, even the front-end developers, they found better way to develop this front-end technology, making it much more interactive, making it efficient, making it better. That comes with cost. The cost is basically now developers do not have a lot of freedom of changing smaller components. So for example, nowadays developers have ways to develop a web-based application, but then if they use a framework, then what happens is that the frameworks comes with these components separately, right? You as a developer will apply the component to your application and then simply design it after that, right? Simply change colors and things like that. But you don't have the ability to go inside of this component and make further enhancement in some cases. So because of that, what happens is that Qtp assumes developers to write an application in certain way, right? Meaning it assumes that developers are going to follow what they are what they need. For example, let's say a developer created this component right here. And now this one doesn't have an ID. So they're assuming that every component in an application has a unique ID, and it doesn't. Nowadays, with modern technology, it doesn't have unique ID for every single component. And Qtp says it has to have it, right? So over time, people realize Qtp is more pain to work with because now it doesn't have things, and developers are making it irrelevant, right? Where you cannot even record it, or you cannot even really use the script even after recording because everything changes as you refresh the browser. And so really this record and run option, which is the highly selling point for Qtp, was no longer necessary or relevant. And over time, developers, or at least the QA guys, we also improved, right? We're using Selenium, or we're actually exposed to new technology, and we're able to write few things ourselves and not really have to rely on really codeless solution for test automation. So nowadays, UFT, where is UFT? UFT is something that you will rarely find. If you go online and look for look for a job that needs UFT, you're going to see very rare. It could be like less than 10,000 compared to Selenium, where you can see like hundreds of thousands of jobs on the Selenium side. So that is what we're going to learn today. So now Selenium IDE. So let me give you more introduction into the tool itself. Any questions on like any confusion between these two? Because on on your resume, we're going to put Qtp and Selenium. Why? Because if you know Selenium, that means you already know a superior tool that not only does the recording, but it also something that you wrote from scratch over time. So you're going to write everything from scratch. So this tool is going to be a piece of cake for you. So this is something that we're going to say initially you used I would say in the very early stage of your career. But we may not even show this, right? It's really that not that significant, but we may show it because just because you already know Selenium. So going back to Qtp is going to be working apart. So why not, right? And we'll explain some technologies how the Qtp works, so that way we can actually explain what Qtp is and how it works. We also provide documentation on these both tools, so that way you have right information to use during an interview. Now, Selenium IDE is a tool and is actually a browser plugin, right? So it's a browser plugin. And this is the IDE here, Selenium Interactive Development Environment, is basically think like similar than IntelliJ, but this one allows you to do few things. You can record, and this is codeless option. So Selenium also have codeless option. This is where you really don't have to write code for test automation. So here you can write test cases. So test script, basically, you can record the test script. So test script you can record and play back, right? That means you really don't do any coding when it comes about using Selenium IDE. The disadvantage is because it's a browser plugin. So it's browser specific. So you can only do, Chrome and Firefox, right? So that's one of the disadvantage, but there are many more disadvantages we can talk about. But Selenium IDE over the years, I see it evolving because every class we teach this tool to you guys. So I see over time they make a lot of improvements. And now Selenium IDE is something that you can actually use at work if you need it. For few ways you can actually use. One is that you can actually record the script, and then you can look at the code. You can actually grab the code and you can do whatever you want with it. And the other thing is that you can actually just use Selenium itself and keep writing your test cases in Selenium IDE. And I'll tell you why we will not use Selenium IDE after certain times. So Selenium IDE is a good tool to get started with automation. It's a good tool to say, okay, we have only 50 test cases and we'll go ahead and automate. But when it comes about testing or writing test cases as much as lots of thousands of test cases, Selenium IDE becomes a really pain in the neck for most of you guys. And it's because Selenium IDE writes everything in a single file. So one test case, one file, two test case, two files, right? So it's flat. It's really flat files, right? So the code reusability is not there. Everything that you learned about creating method, remember? So the creating method is not an option for you with Selenium IDE. The other thing about Selenium IDE is that you will probably duplicate a lot of steps. So your repository is going to be really big, right? So you will have a lot of tests that do not have reusability within them. Therefore, it makes it really, really hard to maintain. So imagine like you have 1,000 test cases and something changed in the application. You have to go to every single test and update. By the time you even finish updating, you have to work on the next update because developers are fast. Every 2 weeks, things are changing. Every 2 weeks, application is changing. So Selenium IDE cannot keep up, right? But now if you have like 100 to 50 test cases, yes, that's totally fine. Selenium IDE is very, very powerful tool, at least in my opinion, because they made a lot of improvements. And we'll talk about that. We'll actually take a look at it today. And now, if you work with a company, they will almost, at least if you work with somebody who knows about automation, maybe a test manager or test lead, and they hired you, they will probably not agree to a Selenium IDE kind of situation. They will say, nah, we're not going to go ahead and use this. We're going to use something called Selenium WebDriver, and we're going to talk about those. And but Selenium IDE, you can actually use it internally for yourself, right? Nobody has to know this, right? So you can actually use this for yourself and come up with ways to automate things without having to do a lot of working yourself. The other thing is that it's a good tool for you to know, but then Selenium IDE is a tool that, some people will be like, oh, wow, use Selenium IDE? No, it's not good enough, right? So you will see that a different vibe for this kind of tool. If somebody knows automation, they'll say, oh, use Selenium IDE. And it's because a lot of people in the very beginning, when they use Selenium IDE, they know how it works, and it was very basic, and they really don't know how Selenium IDE works now, right? It is pretty powerful, but it is for a small project you have to think about. So chances of your manager or maybe your lead coming up to you and saying, don't use Selenium IDE because we have 250 test cases that we need to automate, so it doesn't make sense for you to use this tool, then that's something that they're really going to press about not using. The other thing is that Selenium IDE, almost every time it will have code to open browser. So open browser, close browser, open browser, close browser. Log in a browser. So open browser, log in, do the test, log out. Open browser, log in, do the test, log out. So you see a lot of repeated steps. For example, log in. Why not log in once and then run all of your test cases and then log out at the end, right? With Selenium IDE, it's going to be really, really hard for you to do because You don't have flexibility because you're not the one who's writing code, right? So that flexibility will be necessary to become really, really efficient with your test automation. So these are a few things that you need to know about Selenium IDE, but this is going to be your friend on the side that nobody's going to know about. But also, again, if your manager says we only have 50 test cases, if only somehow we can automate this, then you're going to say, sure, let me take a look, automate it within the next 2 to 3 weeks using Selenium IDE and tell them that, okay, here, all of the tests and it's running fine. So again, the decision has to be made from really what the project is and what is the objective or goal of your automation team. We still didn't talk about what test case qualifies to be automated and what test case qualifies to be manually tested. So we're going to get to that, but let's go ahead and talk about these 4 components of Selenium before we even get there. So since I just started with Selenium IDE already. Selenium Grid is the next tool. I'm going to put that at the end because Selenium Grid, I feel like the order should be different. So 4, this is 4, this is 3, and then this is 2. The next one is Selenium RC. So all this limitation that I talked about earlier about Selenium IDE, somebody says, if we don't have those limitations. If only I can do everything myself. I don't care about recording. I don't want to record my script. I want to write it myself. So then developers came with Selenium RC. And now they give you an ability to write your tests yourself. There is no interface. There is no IDEs for you to use. There is just completely IntelliJ, Java, and your RC, all 3 together. You're able to automate your test cases. So it removes a lot of the disadvantage that Selenium IDE had initially. Now this guy, RC stands for remote control. So it has, the way that it works is basically you write code and then that code goes into a server and Selenium RC will open up that server and that server will translate your code into in a way that it reads by the browser. So browser can understand, right? So browser will understand because no matter how you write your code, as long as you write it properly, it will be later translated. So there is a middleman in here. The middleman is actually a RC server. And now because there is a middleman, even if it takes 2 seconds per step for you to extra, for example, let's say 2 seconds per step when you automate, and you have, let's say 10,000, maybe 10,000 steps because you have only 300 test cases. These 10,000 steps times 2 seconds, that's a lot of time that is causing. So Selenium RC was actually slower than Selenium WebDriver. So later what they did, they took Selenium RC code and they improved it. They made it much better. And now Selenium WebDriver was something that was directly able to communicate with the browser because now every company that creates a browser, for example, Google, Firefox, and Apple creates the Safari browser, they were able to create you a WebDriver that Selenium WebDriver interacts with directly, right? So now every browser there are WebDrivers that the browser creators, the company who creates the browsers actually provide because they want to make your life easier to automate. So now this guy doesn't need that middleman. So therefore it's faster. So over the years, what they did is that now they work more and more on this because more and more people are using Selenium WebDriver compared to Selenium RC. There are a handful of companies still using RC because it's really hard for them to migrate from RC to WebDriver because they have so many test cases, right? So it requires a lot of money and effort, and they don't want to do that. But there are companies where they don't even choose these tools, right? I think this is not being maintained anymore. I think so. I gotta check. But Selenium WebDriver is something being maintained, actively, and this is something is the latest and greatest for the Selenium suite, right? So not only that the Selenium IDE was being maintained or is being maintained right now, this is also being maintained. And this is something where we're gonna put all of our effort to learn Selenium WebDriver. The last one is Selenium Grid. Selenium Grid is a companion for Selenium WebDriver and Selenium RC. So Selenium Grid, if you look at the name, what it does is that it creates a grid system that will run your test in multiple machines, multiple browser at the same exact time. So you can actually configure your Selenium to say, I want to run all of my tests in Chrome, Firefox, and Edge at the same time, and it will run it, right? Selenium Grid will understand that and it will run it for you. You can run tests in parallel. So for example, if you have 100 test cases that takes 100 minutes, you can cut down the time to run the test to 10 minutes by dividing your tests into 10 and have Selenium run all of them into 10 different machines or 10 different browser. So basically Selenium is just a companion to help you run your test faster and get the result faster. And it works with Selenium WebDriver and RC both, not the Selenium IDE. I don't know if the improved version actually works with Grid, but this too works with the WebDriver. Selenium Grid works with WebDriver and RC. So if I do a Google of a image, that will give me an accurate representation of Grid. That's going to be easier for me to like demonstrate. Okay, let's go into this tool. So right here, right off the bat, I can see the images. So this is probably one of the image that I would use. So now you have a machine and you have a hub. This could be a remote hub, meaning this is a virtual machine somewhere in Amazon, like Amazon Web Services. And this machine has absolute control over 3 other machines, right? So it has access to Windows, Linux, and Mac, as well as some devices. So now this guy at will at any time controls these machines, right? So this guy is telling these guys, I want you to run all of my tests in these browsers, each one of them at the same exact time. As you can see, it's happening parallel. And this is what makes your test, I think this is more accurate. This is what actually makes your test run faster, because you're really running everything in parallel. You don't have to wait for one to finish and then go into the next one. So if your company, the chances of automation being used for cross-browser testing, meaning multiple browser, is high. So if they said you want to run your tests in Chrome, Firefox, IE, all 3, and you set up your let's say hub server using Selenium Grid, then you can tell it to run on all 3 browsers in all 3 different machines, right? And that's how Grid works. Okay, it is a companion for these 2, Selenium RC and WebDriver. Now let's go back for a second. Let's clarify which test case qualifies to be automated, and then we're going to actually automate one of the test case today. How's that sound?
Great.
Sounds great. Okay. Now you tell me a list of things. Why should we automate some test cases, and why should we, because this is a list of things that you have to make a decision. We as the QA engineer are the ones who's going to make decision on which test case should be automated and which test case should not be automated. So let's create a list. First is should be automated. Right? So this is a list for should be automated, and this is a list for should not be automated. Okay. So one of the clue that I will tell you is that, and I think this is something that is like a metaphor, right? Is that you don't take more than what you can eat, right? So let's say you automate so much where you defeated the purpose of automation at some point, meaning you automated everything in a way that now you need hundreds of people to come and just help you maintain your automated test cases. Then it defeats the purpose, because now you're really not doing any automation. You're doing manual because you have to add so many people now. Automation is there to reduce the workforce. It's supposed to be automatic, and it shouldn't need constant, babying of your script, going every day and kind of updating your script because something happened, right? So that's something that you want to keep in mind. So let's start by listing what should be automated.
Anything that's going to be very time consuming if you do it manually.
Okay, so to save time. So if something is humanly not possible, and it takes very long time. So again, I'm writing in our own understanding. And this is something that you can actually mention in an interview and you'll be still fine. Let's go into the next. So you guys give me the ideas, right? What who wants to go next for a list of items?
Anything like that has be like a lot of components to it and has I don't know, I think that falls back into number one actually.
Yeah. So category, we're not gonna add same duplicate categories. So this is in the same category. Guys, think. Now use your critical thinking skills, please. And tell me, you know what, even if you come up with something that should not be automated, go ahead and give it to me. It's better to have something already in writing. If you really ask yourself the purpose of automation, you will probably be able to answer most of the question here, most of the list.
Something that should not be automated is probably if it needs to be like released quickly and needs to go through a human check.
Okay. One-time test, that means that this test case will no longer be necessary after running it the first time, right? After you validate it, it's never going to be again used or run again because it's not going to be relevant. Okay, come on, guys. Let's create this list, because this is the checklist that you might use, or this is the type of checklist that you might even talk about. Because the first thing they're going to ask you, what is your decision making in terms of what should be automated, what should not be automated, right? What test cases will be automated? What who decides that? So in a perfect world, the whole team decides, right? In the current situation, what's out there, sometime the QA lead may decide because he has a really good understanding of the application. And sometime your QA manager might decide, but then you can give feedback and say, this is a test case that we should not automate. So you have the freedom as an automation engineer to say, I will not automate this, and that's totally fine. You can say, I should not automate this because of this and that. So you will go back and say, no, this is not possible, or this is something that we should not automate, but they might just give you a list of items for you to automate. But you can also, as you progress through your career, you will be also the person who's going to make those decisions where you have to choose between test cases, what should be automated. If you work in Agile, most likely you are the one who's going to make decisions regardless, right? Because you already wrote your test scenarios. From the test scenarios, you will separate test scenarios that are going to be candidates for automation, and there are candidates going to be for manual. So you will be the one who's going to do that, and then you'll carry out those tasks after. Okay, so number 2, who wants to go for number 2 for should be automated? What should be automated?
I guess like integration of a software where one component is working with the other component.
Okay, so this is something integration testing, right? So that means, I would say, in a simplest way to put it would be repeated testing, right? Because, and let me know if it makes sense, repeated testing, that means integration testing is something that falls under repeated testing. It means whenever something changes in the application, you want to check all of the parts or all of the module around the application is working as a whole, and they're communicating with each other perfectly. And you might want to do that kind of testing again and again and again, right? So I'm not gonna just say integration testing because you know that means we have to put regression, we have to put smoke, and there are other testing types. But I will say repeated testing, any testing that needs to be tested again and again and again. And integration is one of the testing types that needs to be tested again and again and again because your application is changing again and again. Okay. Number 3. Number 3, guys. Something that is probably subject to human error. So there are test cases that you will see, like if a human does it, the human may make assumptions to say, okay, it worked last time, I will not test it, right? So some test cases where it's so painful that a human will sometimes skip those test cases because they think it's working. Oh man, I know what, this is so painful. I do that all the time. Every week I have to test this. I think it's working fine. I think it is working fine, and then you just go and pass it yourself manually, right? So this is subject to human error because what's going to happen is that it becomes so painful. Is that you may time to time go ahead and skip the test, or it may be so hard for you to realize if it pass or fail is that you just say, oh, it passed. Okay, it passed, and it is passing every time because obviously you don't know what is the baseline, what is the stable, right? What is actually something that you should be looking at, right? So it could be database, right? Where you the changes that taking place in database, you're saying, oh, something is happening on the front end, so that's why database is being populated, and it's fine, right? But if you had the machine to do this, like your test automation, then it will not make assumptions. It will go ahead and say it passed or it failed. There is only 2 outcomes, true or false. So subject to human error is another, checklist. If that is fall under subject to human error, you want to automate that. Time consuming was there already. What else? So repeated testing is there. Requirement. So basically, let's say some part of your application is high priority and a customer cannot do their activities without those, part of the application. And those part of the application also do not change a lot, right? Meaning part of the application that has really minimum changes that taking place. And let's say stable component, stable features of the application, they don't change a lot. So for you to go and test it manually again and again, those features, it's really, really killing time for no reason. Why not just automate that and save yourself some time doing this again and again? And this might kind of feel like repeated testing, but high priority test cases that customer cannot live without needs to be automated. High priority test or a high priority business requirement. And then you have stable feature that doesn't change often, right? And likely it will not change. And then let's say high risk, like it's always there. For example, login, right? It's always there, right? If you look at it, it's working fine, no problem. But then all the scenarios that we talked about for login, you as a human will not do it all the time, every 2 weeks. You're not going to go and run 50 test cases and login. It's going to get really exhausting. So those test cases, like login feature, will not change for a very long time, guys. Once they create it and it's done. So there will be features in your application where it doesn't change a lot. So isn't it better to just automate and just leave it? That's it, done. Because it doesn't change a lot, your test case will not fail, or you shouldn't expect your test case to fail every sprint, every 2 weeks when the application changes. So you will at least know that your test automation covered those components. Okay. The next one is what test case should not be automated, right? And think about this way. You don't want to have so many test cases where you don't know what is good and what is bad at this point. It's just too much for you to handle. Some test cases, I would say, look and feel. Who does look and feel better? Better testing than a robot.
Human.
Exactly, and that's where we want to jump in and provide our expertise. But most importantly, Selenium can do look and feel testing, but it's gonna be so tedious where Selenium is gonna be very, very flaky. The test cases will give you false positive all the time. You'll say, oh, I didn't see this. And it is gonna be oversensitive. Your test cases are gonna be so sensitive that something changes on the UI will fail. Anything unrelated changes will fail your test and it becomes unusable. Your test case will be unusable at some point because you didn't know when to stop automating. So look and feel there, and just like that, there are a few other. So maybe like complex test cases that require so much of an effort, right? Meaning like if you were to automate this, you have to spend so much time. And top of that, the effort itself, like let's say it took you 3 weeks to automate it. And then when it comes about running it, you have to go back and update it again because it changes all the time. So unstable features that changes all the time is another one. The other one would be if things are not ready. So whenever you join a team, let's say you just joined today and I'm like your manager and I'm coming and saying, hey, can you automate these test cases? You can go back and say, no, I cannot. I cannot automate them because your application is not ready. The application has to be ready for automation because let's say you automated 10 test cases today. Tomorrow you come into work and now you have to update those test cases. Where do you have time to create more new test cases at this point? You don't have time because your application is so unstable that developers are pushing code every day. Your application is changing every day. And this is the type of scenario that happens in the very beginning stage of the software development. So if it's a brand new project and things are still being figured out, things are still being done, you should not automate for the first 6 months. You should refrain. You basically just tell them your application is not ready. We want a stable application. Otherwise, you're going to do this work again and again and again and defeating the purpose of automation. Okay. Remember, automation is to remove human interaction. So if you are the human and you wrote the test today, tomorrow you have to go and interact and fix their test. That's defeating the purpose of automation, in my view. Okay, so these are a few things you want to note when it comes about automation, guys. Okay, now let's automate some test cases. Who wants to give me a test case that you want to automate? And we may use Chrome today. I'm going to go ahead and remove something. This is, and then completely install this from scratch so we can see how it works. I already had it from last class. So let's see. Remove from Chrome. Okay. So do you guys want to take a 10 minutes break, come back and finish, and we'll finish by 10. Maybe a 10 minutes break. When you guys come back, we're going to just cover on writing a test case today for the first time. So it is kind of special. And then we will run it and see how how automatically test runs and follows your command. And then we'll try to finish with that within the 40 minutes. So I will say 9:25. If you guys can come back, take that small break, drink some coffee, and try to focus on what's gonna be done, because your next homework is gonna be onto this one where you might write some test cases. Okay, so homeworks are piling also. So we'll talk about that at the end. So come back at 9:25. All right, I'll see you then. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, good. All right, so So again, like automation, right? So we're going to automate a test case. That's the first thing. But anytime we automate, we either have to have test scenario or test case. Many companies out there, they write the test cases already because it doesn't take time to write test cases, but it does take time to automate them. You have to think through, you have to write your code, and you have to do trial and error, and also make it more efficient and effective, right? What you're validating, it really, really matters. So what they do is that they said, okay, we're going to automate this later. We're going to just create the manual test cases for now. And then as we automate, we will take those manual test cases out of our list to run them every release or before every release, right? So now automated tests comes and rescue whenever, even I guess any of these cases, right, where you have a lot of test case, which is manual, and you want to automate, or you are just starting a project and you want to automate from the very beginning. But at least that application has to be stable. So what typically happens in a sprint is basically you do feature testing. So all the new features that is being done is, let's say, feature testing, right? But then once the feature testing is done and we're ready for release, all these new features are ready for release, for example, then you have to make sure that you're not breaking existing features of functionality before the before all this new feature were added. So that includes integration testing, that includes regression testing, that includes smoke testing. So smoke testing is one that you need to do right before you can say, I give my okay to release, right? That's the first thing. So when you do smoke testing, you're just validating the environment is healthy, everything is at least major part of the application is working fine. The next one, you do regression. So regression testing is basically you run all of the test cases that was previously created. So that includes test case and test scripts to make sure that all of the test cases are working fine. And integration testing is as needed base. If they didn't really create something that will communicate with other, let's say, other module, other part of the application, or it could be a separate application that is interacting with. So integration testing is going to be maybe falls under the regression because again, regression will contain those test cases. So just keep that in mind. So now you want to, before you want to say it's ready for release or we can go ahead and release this, they will probably ask QA team to say, okay, how's everything looking, right? And you might have to do a release approval, right? So it goes from maybe your team, maybe your manager is the person who's going to say, okay, it's ready, it's approved for our release. They will probably come back and ask you, is everything good, right? If all of the test cases are fine, did we break anything and all of that stuff. So the way for you to know if you broke anything is going to be regression, and then smoke test is to make sure the major part of the application is tested before even going into regression, because regression is going to be running everything, right? All of the test cases. So imagine like you have to spend 2 days of regression because it includes manual test cases as well as automation. So isn't it better just quickly run this smoke test to make sure that at least if there's any obvious issues, you can report that early. That is better instead of spending 2 days and come back to them and say, hey, I have these issues. And now the release is going to be delayed. So these two typically gets automated, right? Now the test cases falls under these two criteria, or these two testing types are repeated testing, all the things that we just talked about earlier, right? All of these checkpoints actually falls under those two type of testing. Where did it go? Right here. So those will be automated for you. So now if you are able to fully automate smoke, and automation for smoke should be 100% automation, right? So you can click on a button, 10 minutes later, you tell your boss, hey, everything looks fine. I'm going to now do regression. Regression happens 2 hours later. You tell them everything is good, everything passing. Isn't it better instead of spending 2 days, 3 days, 4 days of manual regression testing? And sometimes regression tests are so big is that 2 days is not enough. It may need 2 to 3 weeks to finish if you do it manually. Okay. So now with that understanding, where you fall in and why automation is such a helpful tool in your team when you develop an application, is because again, it speeds up the process, it saves time, and it tells developers early what is broken so they can fix it as early as possible. But most importantly, it saves time, repeated kind of work, right? So imagine like you do the same thing every day. Let's say you wake up and you go to groceries and you buy a few things, right? And you know exactly what to buy. You know exactly what you want. So you do that every single day. Now, if you do that in purpose because you like to walk and all of that stuff, that's great. But if you, now that you do that repeatedly, isn't it better you just schedule something like on Amazon or something, right? Say, okay, I'll go ahead and order the same exact item and it'll come every single day and I'll go and find it myself. So you're just basically saving time, but most importantly, you might also save money too. And that is also true for test automation, guys. And you'll see like very little company uses the test automation to their advantage. It's always like, oh, we just want to have this test case automated, but then they never use it at the end, right? So yeah, I guess as we go through the automation class, we'll talk about those situations. But for now, let's learn the first tool that will let us automate a test case, and then we can do it on Chrome or Firefox. And most importantly, how do we record a script? So if I was to, let's say, automate W3, for example, right? And then what I'm doing is I'm coming in here. My test case is to make sure that as a user, I can go into each section and it opens up its own, like for example, Java Home, right? If I'm a human being, and I click on it and I see that this came up, maybe let's say Java Home, let's say, let's say Java tutorial came up, this text, I can say, okay, it worked, right? Because as an automation engineer, you'll have to make those decisions to say, what can you see in order to consider if it worked or not? The next one, Java interaction. If I click on this and I see Java introduction, then it worked, right? Agree or disagree? Do I have to check every single word in here? If I'm my purpose is to see that if I click on it, it took me to its own section. So do I have to go in and check every single thing? If I want to, I can. Maybe there is a test for that, but my test specifically, the test case is to make sure that I click on each one of them and I make sure that it opens, and then that's it. Okay. Understood? Everybody understood the test case here?
Yeah.
Okay. So we can go deeper, right? Deeper is like, okay, we click on this and now we're going to check every single thing that is displaying here, right? But that becomes like, okay, are we testing content or are we testing the click? If I click, it opens new thing. So the purpose of the test case, at least, is clicking and making sure it opened up its own page and move on to the next one and move on to the next one until we all the way go down to the array. That is my test case. So now, first thing first, I'm going to add the plugin. It's called Selenium IDE plug in Chrome, for example. So you could do it with Chrome and Firefox. So if you click on it, the next thing you should see is this extension, seleniumhq.org, which will tell you how to use it. But we're going to learn that today, right now. These are some pictures and some best practices and stuff like that. But let's go ahead and add these to our Chrome. That's the first thing, add as an extension. Once you add it, it will pop up right there. But if it doesn't pop up, then you click on this extension icon. And then the next thing you have to find your Selenium. So I have so many things. So now I'm going to go ahead and pin it. Okay. Once I pin it, it's right there. Now it's easily accessible. Now I will go back to my test website. This is my test website. So I'm going to, first thing, I'm going to go ahead and take my, so we're in Java. So I'll go ahead and copy the URL, right? Because I'm going to need that as a base URL. I'm going to click on my Selenium and it will open up this small box. Okay, just let me know if you guys can see. So now it's open up this box and it gives you some options. So let's go through the options. So first says, what would you like to do? Do you want to record a new test in the new project? Do you want to open an existing project? Do you want to create a new project and all of that stuff? So for us, because we just opened it for the first time, we need to not only create a new test case, but also a new project. So we can put everything under the project, right? So then I'm going to click on this right there, record, and do the basically first thing is record. First thing is to put the name of the project, right? So just put some sort of name that you like. So I'm going to say learning Selenium SEIDE, right? Selenium IDE, that's my name for the project. The next thing is, what is your project URL? You should only have one URL for your project majority of the time. So if you go and work for a company, most likely you're gonna have just one project, right? One URL for QA environment, whatever environment you'll be working on. So it shouldn't be like 10 different URLs, right? So now this URL is happen to be the project that we're working on right now. And so we're going to put that. So start recording. As soon as I click on start recording, you should see that it's in the bottom. It says I'm recording. Selenium is giving you some confirmation that I'm recording. As soon as it opens up, first thing as a QA engineer that you should do is that validate where you are. You want to validate you are on the right page or not, right? So if I open up this website and I can see Java tutorial, then I'm on the right page. I'm going to highlight this text. I'm going to right click and I'm going to go into Selenium IDE. And then I'm going to put assert. Okay. Assertion means verify, right? You want to verify something. So you'll see verify is also there and assert is also there. Assertion is basically checkpoint where you said, I want to check for this. If it's there, then pass. If it's not there, then fail, right? And that's what you're saying. You have verify is the same thing. If basically verify is also doing the same assertion, but it's soft. So what it will do, if it's not there, it will not immediately exit out of the test. It will say, I didn't find it. I will remember this. And it will move on to the next step. It will move on to the next step. And after the entire test is finished, it will say, hey, you were looking for this and that, but I only found this, right? So assertion is gonna immediately exit out of the test. It will say, I didn't find this, done, no more, right? Most of the time, we're gonna use assertion because it's more helpful. You right away know what failed, so you can fix it and then go back to the test. Verify is also helpful sometimes when you have multiple checks and you don't care if one of them fails. You just want to care at the end. You want to know which one failed at the end, but you still want to continue test and verify the remaining items that you want to verify. So now we also see wait for, right? Wait for is another option for you. These are methods, by the way, will give you ability to say, okay, I want to wait for something. So the first thing first, because you just visited this website, it may take 10 seconds, it may take 20 seconds, it may take 30 seconds, depending on the mood and of the server, right? If the server is slow, then it may take a long time. So the first thing first, I'll say, if you visit this URL, I want to wait for this text to appear before I want to move into the next. So I'm going to say the wait for text right there, right? So it's going to wait until Java tutorial text shows exactly at this location. Okay, just keep that in mind. The next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to put an assertion right here. I'm going to say, if I see learn Java, this specific word, then also good to go. So I'm going to say assert, and I'm going to say assert the text. Okay, so if the text is there, then it is also working for me. Now, one thing you want to keep in mind, because Selenium is recording everything, don't click everywhere because it's recording absolutely everything that you're doing here. So you have to make sure that you're only clicking and moving or at least interacting with features of the application that you really, really care about for your test case. So if your test case is not, you have no business of going and clicking on this one right there, then you shouldn't, because you don't want to include that in your test case. Whatever you do right now is being recorded. It is being recorded right now. So we already validated home. The next one, I'm going to go and click on intro. Once I click on intro, I'm going to validate this, text. If this text is there, then my test passes. So I'm going to say assert text right there. Text is there, pass. I'm going to click on the next one. And I think we should have put wait for, but okay, it's fine. We will see how fast this runs. And then assert and then text. So we did the 3-tab testing so far. The next one is Java syntax. And then we're going to go ahead and put in another assertion. We're going to say the text should be there. I'm going to end the test right there. We don't want to go and repeat all of these, right? So let's go ahead and see how our test looks like. And then I'm going to click on my IDE. I'm going to stop it right there. Okay, so we click on this and the test stops. Now it says, okay, what do you want to name this test case? Now, guys, remember one thing. A test case is not a test case if it doesn't have what? Tell me. This is a pop quiz for you guys. A test is not a test. Let's forget about test case. A test is not a test if it doesn't have
Scenario?
no some sort of way to measure the success, right? So some ways to say, okay, if this happens, then it passed. So for example, you are taking a test for something in school. If your teacher says, okay, here it is, and it's regardless of the outcome, it passed, you'll get 100%. Obviously, it's not a test anymore, right? So same thing, a test case, if it doesn't have an assertion, whether it's a soft assertion or a hard assertion, then it is not a test because you're just browsing through. If I didn't right click and create those assertion, then my test would not be a test. It is just steps. It's just the steps. Okay. So now this one, I'm just going to say verify something. So I'm going to give it a nice name, verify if W3 Java tutorial tab works, for example, tab works at this point. So I'm just you can rename it however you want, but this is the name that I came up with right now. And that's it, right? So now we can see how the code looks like. So let's see what we did so far. We went to the website. This happens automatically. So you can change the browser size if you want to. You can make it bigger or smaller, whatever you want. We clicked on a bunch of times. We click on H1 a few times, right? So this clicking on H1 is not necessary because why? We're only validating H1 having this value, Java tutorial, right? So we don't really need this one of clicking. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this. So right now, whatever I'm doing is just trimming my tests, right? I'm just making sure I'm keeping things that I need. That was an extra click. I don't need it in my test. This is another one, extra click. After checking for the value, I had another extra click for the same H1, so I'm going to delete that. I have a extra click right here. I'm going to delete that, you see, for H2. And then we have a click on Java, that's fine. And then we have 2 extra, right? So after clicking on intro, the next thing should be like introduction. So I'm just trimming like all this stuff like that I don't need, right? So these things I don't need, I'm going to go ahead and delete those. And then the next one was clicking on Java get started, which was right here. And we did mouse over and then we click. Mouse over was not really necessary. Mouse over means when I go and put my mouse on something, it kind of gives me more information. So it wasn't necessary. So I'll go ahead and delete that. And then same thing, right? We don't really need these 2. We only verifying if this get started text is there. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this. And again, making my test more and more relevant to what I was intending to do, right? My test case, not just having a bunch of clicks for no reason. So it says link. So this is a click. The next one is Java syntax click, and I did that. Once I did that, let me see. No. Once I did that, the next one was to check if his get started is there. Okay, I don't know why this is there. But if I did click on, I think these steps has to be, yeah, the next one for this one after clicking was syntax. So get started, I don't understand why this is even there. So this should be actually up here, right? Once I click on Java get started, we should be checking for this instead, right? Then, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so this is get started, link text, mouse over. We don't need this. We already clicked it, so we're gonna remove that. We also going to remove this. Guys, let me know if it doesn't make sense. So Java syntax, and that's it. All we're doing is just making sure that we just keeping things that we, you know, we basically care about at this point for our test case. So now that we did this, in this view, I'm going to teach you guys 3 things. Is that the way that it identifies what is what on the page is by looking into the attribute and the value. So we're going to talk about those. But first, let's see if our test runs. Okay. There is 2 different buttons, right? One is to run multiple tests, and this one is to run just a single test. You can also slow down time, so that way the test doesn't run so fast that you don't even see what's really happening. So I'm going to run it now just to see, and it opens up preparing the tests. It went to Java, and then let's see if it clicks on it. It clicks on intro. It clicks on get started. It clicks on Java syntax, I believe, the next one. But if it fails, we'll fix it, if anything. Okay, there we go. It clicked on Java syntax. All of my steps worked the way that I actually wanted to, right? Now, in this case, it happened so fast, you can actually go ahead and slow it down, right? But at least your test is intelligent enough to wait also certain time before say, hey, I didn't find this. So that's why it did take a little bit of time between these steps, okay? Because it does wait, it has some built-in wait there, default wait, basically. So far, so good. Any questions here before we move on to the next thing? And you can see the time that it took for you to, like for each step, there is a time that it took, right? How long it took to run your test. So if I run it again, guys, let's see, it opened up, it went to the website, and it can do more than one thing. Obviously, we want to probably do another website that might be even more interactive. Instead of just clicking, we may want to write something, you know. So we'll do that as well. But you understood here, right? This IDE really hijacking a browser and telling the browser what to do and browser listening to it, right? And you can do it as many now that this automated test case is ready to go. Your boss comes to you and say, hey, can you run those test cases and tell me the results? Sure. You have 20 test cases here. Go ahead and click on all of them, run all, you know, and you go out to get a coffee. When you come back, your test case is all done. And which one failed and which one didn't fail, you can see and tell your boss, okay, here, I ran all 50 test cases, 5 of them failed. So I'm gonna investigate further why they failed. And then you will run one at a time and see physically what really happening when those test cases are running to tell him more update about those failed test cases. How does that sound?
Really cool.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah,
That's
I'm gonna
good.
play around with this.
Oh yeah, definitely you should, because this is probably something that you can use it for yourself every day. Things. Imagine like you're writing a letter or something, or not letter. Let's say imagine you're doing some things repeatedly in a website. You can actually do this with this tool and at least prepare the situation until the final decision maker is going to be you. Now, this was one test case, and again, this test case would not be a test case if you didn't have an assertion. Assertion means you're just verifying something after something else, right? So you did some click and then you're verifying if the text was there. So now let's say for each one of these, when you click on it, it opens up and you see it goes into target, but it does have the base URL right there. So it basically uses /Java at the end to go to the Java tutorial. The other thing you want to make sure is that if you click on H1, H1 is actually a tag that is meant for CSS to use for coloring, right? So if I go into Java tutorial, this is not something that was invented by Selenium. Selenium just basically went ahead and took what's there. So if I go back in here and I right click and I inspect and see what this tutorial is under, we can see which tag it is using, right? So I can click on this and click on here, and you can see this is actually H1, right? That's how it knows that H1 should have this text, period, right? That's how it knows. And that's what it is doing the comparison to make sure H1 has this text, okay? So similar to the other ones, this locator coming from directly from the website. And we're going to learn a lot more about the locator. Like I said, right now, don't worry about it. Just use like a non-coder and just go ahead and write your test cases. Now, wouldn't it be cool if I can run the same test in my IDE? And then wouldn't it be cool if I can see the Java code behind this? Because this is not Java, right? This is just telling you, giving you very straightforward thinking that you are not a coder. But shouldn't it be better for us to see how does the Java code look like? Right? So guys, right? You want to see the Java code that, or at least how you could have done the same thing by yourself writing code instead of coming in here, right? Yes or no?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, like
Okay.
behind the scenes.
Okay, so let's see the how Java code looks like. So there is a feature for you to convert this into any language of your choice. Now, that doesn't mean unlimited. It just means that whatever Selenium supports, whatever language Selenium supports, will be able to convert into that. Otherwise, converting into a language that Selenium doesn't support really doesn't mean anything because it cannot run it, right? So if I click on this and I right click and I go ahead and click on export, right? And now it says, what do you want? Which language? Do you want JavaScript? Do you want Python? Do you want Ruby? Do you want C#? And there is 2 different flavors of C#. So now I'm going to say I want Java and JUnit, right? JUnit is basically part of Java framework. And then it says include original tracing code command, include step description as separator comment. So I'm going to probably do this so that way it can tell us like what's really happening. And I'm going to say, just give me some comments in these steps. So I'm going to click on export and it will download it for you, right? You see right there, and it'll give you the whole class. So now that you have it, you can already see IntelliJ icon right there. I'm going to go ahead and open my IntelliJ and I'm going to run this test, the same exact test in my browser right now.
I'm sorry, where
in my
did you
IntelliJ.
click to do that? I apologize. Where did you click to find that?
I don't see the export.
Sure. So if you're right here, right click and then click on export right there. Now, export, you're not going to see it if you're building the test. Once your test is done and you moved into, like if you're in execution, then you might not see it. You might have to go to the test and then you have to, you can click on export. So remember, this icon right here matters, right? So if you are in executing, I believe executing, and then right click, you will not see the export option. So you have to go into your test drop down. So at this point, you're not executing. You can right click and you can see export. Okay. And once you click on export, you know you're choosing Java's JUnit. We didn't learn the language, but Java. And then you want comma separated comments so you understand what line does what, right? So now that we have the class, Java class ready to go, I'm gonna plug that into my IDE IntelliJ and try to run that real quick. And again, guys, like I said, this class, if you don't really understand this, that's totally fine. We may do a little bit more deeper. Today's class is just to make sure that we get a little bit more excited about test automation, right? What's coming, right? What's really going to be more exciting in the future classes where we're going to be automating so many test cases. We're going to go into different web applications and automate those test cases. So what I will do, I will go ahead and add, and this is where you will learn a little bit about Maven as well. So I'm going to go ahead and click on my source, and let me just go ahead and open this to make sure it is fine. And on the test itself, like notice like we have all this stuff, right? So to keep all of your classes here for now, because we're gonna put that into a public repository so you can showcase your work at some point after you're done with this class. So at this point, what I will do, I will add my class in here. So I can just go ahead and oh, it just opened up automatically. Okay. So you see, like it basically opened up automatically when I clicked on it because it knows what it is. So I'm going to go ahead and put it inside of my Java, folder. And oh, okay, 1 second. I just have to probably click on move or something. So let me go into real quick the this was an idea project first day. Okay. The next thing that I want to do, I'm going to go into my Finder and find it, right? So this was my class. I'm going to right click. I'm going to go and copy it. The next thing what I want to do, I want to find my idea project somewhere, wherever it is. This one right here. So I'm going to see if I can open up the directory. Open setting. Okay. Open in Finder, right? So now that I opened in Finder, and this is my project, right? So I'm going to click on that. Inside of it, SRC, the same thing, right? I'm just going to go into my Java, right? So test, and then Java, right? Inside of the Java, I'm just going to go ahead and paste that and done, right? This class, I just added a new class, and that's it. I don't know why like drag and drop doesn't work. I would probably just drag and drop it, before it used to work. I don't know why, but anyway. So now we just added our class. Okay, so this class, let's take a look what's really happening. Now you'll see upset. It's all red. Everything is red is because up until now, we've been playing with Java. All of these are Java, right? Selenium was not added in the library. In this library, it's Java, 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 all Java, right? JDK. So now this is upset because it's saying, hey, your code is referencing Java, but you really don't have any, Java libraries, because all these things, for example, WebDriver, like all this code right here, like the methods, get text, click, these belongs to Selenium, right? Selenium basically just has those methods. So if the Selenium is not here, then how are you referencing them? How are you even using them? So first thing first, we have to add Selenium to our project. So if I go to pom.xml, and I can see, so far we only have Java in here. So I'm going to go ahead and add my dependency, right? To make sure my tasks actually work. So the first thing first, dependency goes inside of dependencies. So just do what I say for now. So first tag is dependencies, and I'm going to go ahead and end this tag with dependencies right there. Now I can add dependency inside of it, right? I can say I need Selenium. So because we're using Maven project right there, as you can see is Maven, we have to go to something called Maven repo. So if you go to Maven repository, it will give you the code that we need. And this is something you don't type it in, don't type it in, just copy it from here. And we look for Selenium and then Selenium Java, and then we take a version. So I wouldn't take anything latest because it's still under work and I don't want to experiment with anything. So I'm going to take the one that is being used highly, which is this one. So 3.1.4, and then see Maven. We'll take the dependency code right there. So what you are doing is telling your project, your IDE, hey, I'm going to use Selenium, and I'm going to use Selenium version 3.1. Can you download this for me? And your IDE is saying, yeah, sure, I will download it. Please click here, right there. Okay. As soon as you click on it, it will download it for you. It's downloading in the bottom right there. You see importing Maven project. And now you have all the Maven stuff, like all the Java, Selenium stuff at this point, right? So if you go ahead and refresh your project and you open up this, and you can see Selenium, all the Selenium things were added for you. See Firefox, Chrome, all the browser related stuff. It's right there for you. Okay. Now, if I go back to my test, and now I want to see like what really happening. I see that WebDriver is fine, is happy, but then I see before, right? It's upset. It's upset because these annotations are part of JUnit. Remember when we exported, we said JUnit and Java. So we need to add JUnit as well in order to make sure this is not also upset in our code, right? So go ahead and click on JUnit next. And I would do the same thing. If you click on JUnit, you want to find a stable version, right? So these are multiple version. I wouldn't even go into this. These are still on RC. So let's find something stable, maybe like highly used 27 and has one vulnerability. Whatever. Let's take this 4.11. And if it gives us problem, then we'll probably fix that. So now we will go ahead and add the second dependency. So we added the Selenium and the second one was JUnit, okay, 4.1. The other thing we're probably missing is that, and this is something comes from experience. So we need to see what is the setup for our IDEA IntelliJ, right? IntelliJ IDEA. So if I say Selenium setup for IntelliJ, IntelliJ Selenium setup, and they have their own website. Let's see. I just want to make sure that we did the right thing. And you'll see that we missed one thing, which is we added the Selenium, we added the other stuff, but we missed the scope, right? So this scope needs to be added right here. Look, we don't have the scope. Oh, never mind, we do. Okay, good. So, okay, we do. That's good. Okay, but if we do see problem, we may have to add scope to Selenium as well. So let's see. Now, we got both of them. If I go back to my test, it's no longer upset. Now it says I can run your test if you want. Look, it's a run option for you. And that's it. Like as simple as that. Now all you got to do is click on this and it can probably run your test. It knows where to go. It knows what to do, the next things. It knows which browser to use, right? You're using WebDriver driver. Driver is actually Chrome driver. Okay. So I can click on this and run. Let's see if it works for me. As off right now, it should open up my browser automatically. It's going to open up a brand new browser and then go from there. So it says the path of the driver executable must be WebDriver. Okay. So now why this is a problem, right? So as you can see, we have another dependency here. JavaScript executor is this. Okay. So now it says like, we need a WebDriver, right? Somewhere in your project, right? Because what's the Chrome gives you, the Chrome developers who actually developed the Chrome, they said, hey, if you're going to automate something using our browser, here's a driver. So I'm going to say Chrome driver. And now they will say, okay, and then this is created by Google for you. And they said, okay, just remember one thing, whatever version of Chrome you have, make sure you have the same version of the driver for it to make it work, right? So I can actually download Chrome driver and put it directly in here, or I can use a library. So these are libraries, right? For example, this one, Selenium, we automatically added. We added also JUnit automatically. I can also add the Chrome driver automatically if I want to, or I can do it manually. Manually would be coming in here and downloading and putting it here to make it work, or I can just do it through here. So something called, if you go to Maven repository right here, and it's called WebDriver Manager, right? Search right there. And let's see, WebDriver Manager will take maybe the latest because we need that. So I'll take this WebDriver Manager and I'm going to put it in here. So dependency, you see more than one dependency in our dependencies tag. Next thing is we're going to load. So that means it's going to download it automatically. So this driver that we needed is downloading automatically. The next thing we need to do is actually go into their homepage and see how can we have Chrome driver enabled, right? So now I'm going to go ahead and see the setup. So it says I need to do this, right? So I'm going to go ahead and, so I could have just come here directly, honestly. So I'm going to add this first. And then, okay, I'm going to replace this guy, 5.1.3, refresh. So this test scope is really important. Okay, so now that we have this, the next thing for me to do is that in my test, I have to say this. That's it. That's all I have to say to create my driver, right? So go ahead and copy this line And this might sound a lot, but if you do it once, it should be fine. So now that I have my driver manager, I'm going to go back and edit my test, because remember the plugin that we use, it knows how to open that driver. But in our case, we have to also create a driver. So I'm going to reduce this code to a point where we kind of, so this is where we have to do, right? Web driver manager. So import class first thing first and set up, and then driver is equal to new driver. We don't need all this extra line of code, and we are good to go. So we put the driver outside. We don't need the JavaScript executor, honestly. Okay, and then we just needed this line. Where did I get that from? Right here. This is how you set up. The next one was to just create the Chrome driver. That's it. So creating the Chrome driver, we already doing it right there. Okay, so if I can run it now and see what happens, let's see. Okay, so it should open up the browser anytime now. And then, okay, there you go. It's opening up a brand new browser, and it's going into all this stuff is done. So notice how fast this is compared to the IDE, where we actually can run the test as well. But now this is your test. Right now that you added your test here, you have all the benefit of using the object-oriented programming language, meaning you can actually move that into a method, and you have cleaner code. You can actually reuse this code whenever necessary. So that's what we're going to basically be learning, but we have to also make sure that we're really solid with the Selenium IDE. I can now run it as many times as I want. And it will open up the browser, right? Do your test, and then it will automatically close the browser for you. That's it. Now, one thing for sure, you want to make sure these are just warning. The red warning is coming because maybe something, we need to set up some things like log4j, and it is not important. We don't need the logs, right? I guess some teams, they will say we want the logs, and some teams that they'll say we don't want it. The reason we will not need a log, because it will automatically do it for us. So down the line, when we automate our tests, we're going to basically remove the need for the logs anyway. So these warnings will be something is there for us all the time, but we will look into and see why our test failing. So now what happens if the test fails? Let's say we purposely fail our test in this case. So let's say it goes into the first thing you see, wait for, right? Okay. And this is like, we are validating, assert that. Okay, good. So now, instead of learn Java, let's say learn Python. So now what do you expect in here? If I run the test, what do you expect? Guys, if I run it now, what is your expectation? What should you see? Is it going to pass or fail?
Fail.
Okay. Fail, right? Because when it goes to Java tutorial and then looking for Python, obviously it's not the case, right? The reason why I'm doing this in purpose to fail our test, to see if our test is good, right? We want to make sure that it is catching if there is an issue in the future, right? So if I run it and it fails, that means our test is actually good. Now I can put it back to learn Java, and I can rest assured that my test is going to do the right thing. And as you can see, immediately failed. And it says something like, let's see, it says, I was expecting learn Python, but I found learn Java. You see, expected result is right there, and actual result is right there. You know, it's very, very readable for you to say, okay, well, this is what's happening. Most importantly, also, your IDE automatically marks it at this line of code to say, okay, this is where the last failure happened. And it'll tell you like, hey, do you want to debug? And we'll learn about debugging as well later on. Debugging is basically pinpointing issue, what's really happening. It will probably stop your task exactly at that point to tell you like, okay, look at the browser now that you're on this line, and tell me if you see the right things before you can update your task. So a few things to note right now. Don't worry about these specific of adding your test to IntelliJ. We're going to get to that. But for now, you want to worry about writing and being able to run your tests here. There is many things that we haven't talked about. For example, what if this locator or this target doesn't work? You can actually click on it and you can choose other alternative targets, whichever works for you. So when you write your test and you finish, you can look into the alternative options. Whenever you see something like this, where it says learn Java as it's using the text as a locator, I would go for that first before anything else, because it's going to be more faster. If it so what IDE does, basically Selenium IDE, regardless of which one you choose to use, it will use all four. So if it doesn't find it, it will wait and try it with this. It will then try with this and it will try with this, all locator to find whatever you're trying to check on your web application. So IDE is pretty intelligent at this point, and the amount of work they did to make it better, it's actually going to be helpful if you in the future want to automate this tool for your project at work. So my takeaway for today's class would be create some test cases here. So I'll just give you a homework, just like generally how we do. I'll give you Google form where you can actually give me your code by exporting, and then we'll probably run it at some point in Selenium, sorry, in IntelliJ. The other thing that we can probably also do is if you need to go out there and watch another video, because IDE is such a small topic, is that you'll see people are teaching you Selenium IDE in 15 minutes on YouTube, right? So you actually can learn a bit more, somebody who's actually going over each and every single component in details. But I would say if you just play with it, you'll be able to just learn what we just talking about, right? I just showed you how to actually create your first test and then just see what's out there, what else that you can do with your test. And that's probably going to give you a better understanding when you actually practice instead of like watching at the video. But yes, you do want to watch a 10-15 minutes video before you can get started. Instead of watching mine, you can probably watch a shorter version of the video and then write few test cases. And then, yeah, when we come back, the next class, we're gonna make sure that our coding challenges are done so we can dive right into automating using Selenium WebDriver. And this is how it's gonna look like some of the test cases, but it's gonna be way, way better looking test cases. This is just bare bone, right? We're gonna make sure things are put into the right places, right? And it will be suitable for an actual project, so you can actually use it. By the time we finish our framework and write some test cases, you can actually take your framework and use that as a starting point for projects that you'll be, I guess, working with. So if you get hired and they don't have anything to begin with, you can actually use this as a starting point and start to write your test cases instead of starting from scratch. So you'll have some code to begin with. Any questions, guys? This is something probably like went really fast, right? You didn't expect.
Yeah, this was very, very fast.
Yeah, I know.
I have a
So-
question.
Mhm.
I have a question. I'm sorry. In your IntelliJ, you have that pom.xml. I don't have that
Mhm.
in mine for some reason.
So if you create so obviously you have to create a Maven project to get this. If you don't have it, if you add it yourself to make sure that you have the right structure of the project, and if you have the right structure, then you will be fine. So you can actually grab this from even online, but the idea is that if you create a new project right here in Intelligent New project, you want to select Maven. You want to select Maven New, and then you want to say Maven right there, Java Maven, and then it will automatically give you the POM. In the POM, we are just adding dependencies. Now, like, you know how we added the Java here? We could have added manually ourselves. We have to go and download Java Selenium and put it here manually ourselves. This was the old way, right? If you refuse to use Maven, let's say, for example, you don't want to use Maven, that's totally fine. But now you have to manually download each item at a time and then put it here yourself. Compared to you just putting it here, and at any point of time you click on the hammer, it will install it for you. So if something goes wrong, this library is not working properly, go ahead and update. You see it's going to give you upgrade option, and then you just click on the hammer and it will automatically download these files, so that way you can write your test. So we'll talk about the Maven. Did we cover Maven at all or no?
No.
Okay.
No, we don't.
Okay, so we'll do that. We will do that as a part of our test automation classes. Right now, we're learning IDE. So yes, keep Maven back of your head that we're gonna get back to that. But right now, you should just focus on writing test cases. And then as soon as we create a framework, this is not a framework. This is just a file added to my Java folder, a class basically, and we're able to run it. But we want to have a framework that will allow us to write our tests in a way that is very organized. So we're going to create the framework from scratch. We're actually going to do 4 different frameworks. So you'll learn from scratch how to create 4 frameworks, and then how to write tests with those frameworks, right? What is a framework again? It's where you're basically creating yourself a tool for automation. So you'll create your own tool from scratch 4 different times with 4 different technology. And that'll be your automation class, guys. Just to give you guys a heads up. But like I said, we're still in the Java side. Just make sure that those are taken care of, so you you can kind of enjoy the next classes. And like I said, I gave you guys a lot of warning in the very beginning about the programming, about these automation classes, where you may feel really outdated with the class, and at some point you yourself will come to me and say, hey, look, I think I'm far behind and I want to basically wait until the next batch or something, right? And that's something that I don't want anybody to do, because if we can finish it together, why not, right? But like I said, if you keep up, then we don't have to see that day. Just make sure you keep up with this. As soon as we finish test automation, guys, it's going to be like really fast pace to the market, right? Because when we do automation, we're going to also learn other tools as well. We already learned the project management tool, Jira task management. Basically, this is where you're going to get your test cases, whatever is the automation task, and you will then come in here and write your test cases. And when you're done, you go back and say, I'm done, and things like that. We're going to have to learn GitHub as well, where you will push the code. You'll learn how to push and pull code the proper way as a developer, and developers do the same. So there is no difference between you and the developer on how you're going to present your code and how you're going to push your code for everybody else to see. And we will also learn database. How can you actually use this tool to connect to database and do some stuff, right? So hopefully we get to that. But again, not everything we can cover, but we will try to cover as much as possible in terms of Selenium. You will feel comfortable. You will be able to, it'll be like almost like blindfolded, meaning the final homework of Selenium will be, okay, here is few test cases, and I want you to automate those, right? And you're going to do it without really getting a lot of help. You can Google it. Google is your friend, and you're going to use that all the time, but you will do it freestyle. You're not going to go and struggle with it. You should be able to do it within that given time frame. So the last homework for automation will be timed, and we'll probably do it live, right? So and that's when I can tell that, okay, yes, we now can automate. Yes, there is a way for us to write our test cases without having to write code, but that's like backup, right? This is, you don't want to use this unless you really have to. So that's why we don't want to just go into this kind of situation. We will learn how to write it the proper way from scratch. But for now, learn these backups in case you need it in the future, right? So my expectation for the next class is that you create some test cases, play around with IDE, and Yeah, I don't know if I should give you guys homework because I need the coding one to be done. So I'll think about it actually. But if you are really, really excited about this, go ahead and start writing some test cases. And yeah, try to go ahead of everybody else. That's not a problem. And then on Saturday, I'll do one more round of Selenium IDE before moving into the actual framework. We may end up, sorry, Saturday, we may end up create test framework on Saturday, like just to get everybody set up. That means you're on your machine, on your computer, when you click on run, everything is set up in a way that it will open up a browser of your choice and it will go into the website of your choice and done, right? And that's what we will call it. Okay, proper setup is done. And now you can expand on that. You can write more test cases. With that said, guys, I'll let you guys spend some time with your IDE. This IDE is not the same as this one. Like I said, this is just Selenium. That's their own plugin, and I don't know why would they. I guess there is a reason, because it is kind of like an IDE, right, where you can write code if you need to, but it's not like as interactive as this one. But I would prefer a new name, different name, because people get confused between, okay, Selenium IDE you're talking about, or you're talking about in general IDE. So if I say IDE, that is this. If I say Selenium IDE, then I'm talking about this. Okay, it's just for the future reference. I'll see you guys on Saturday, and if you guys have any questions, you can ask. Otherwise, we will go ahead and end the class for today. All right, nobody has questions. I'll see you guys on
Thank you.
Saturday. You're welcome.
Thank you. Have a
Good
good
night,
night.
guys.